Well, welcome to another roundtable discussion here on the Concours the virtual Concours. I'm delighted today to say that we're talking about the poster cars. So this is very much about the posters of cars you had on your wall as a young boy or a young girl. So I guess it's the automotive equivalent of Brad Pitt, Farrah Fawcett, or that nice girl on the tennis court with the bottom exposed. It's one of those. But this is the car version of all those things. So which cars did you have on your wall when you are or were a young man or a young lady? So just to introduce myself, my name is Richard Charlesworth, and if you haven't bumped into me at a classic event, you may have heard me over the PA as Master of Ceremonies for the Quail, a motorsports gathering, the curator and presenter of the Concours of Elegance at Hampton Court Palace, or the presenter of the London Concours. I'm also an established concours judge and reasonably well known for my association with Bentley Motors, having worked for the company since 1974, most recently as Director of Royal VIP Relations, Head of the Heritage Collection, and as a Brand Ambassador. Now, Marek Reichman joined Aston Martin in 2005 as Director of Design, and since then has evolved and strengthened the company's iconic styling. This more recently has been delivered in the form of the V12 Vantage S, the Vanquish Volante, Rapide S, and the DB11. And creations to leave the purpose-built, award-winning Aston Martin Design Studio under Marek's leadership include the DBX Concept, Aston Martin Vulcan, and Vantage GT12, first unveiled in 2015, and more recently the DB11, of course. Marek is now Chief Creative Officer, and his experience has made him a regular judge at design awards and a lecturer at conferences, as well as being a concours judge himself. Now, Sam Hancock is a professional racing driver. He's also a coach and advisor to private clients on classic car transactions and historic racing programs. A contemporary racing career, competing internationally at the highest levels of Le Mans sports car and GT racing, yielded a European title, many international victories, and a stint as a works driver for the aforementioned Aston Martin racing. Now immersed in a thriving world of historic racing, Sam sources and sells exceptional cars for private collectors between a busy calendar of historic motor races. He's also a regular presenter for Petrolicious and Collecting Cars, commentator for Eurosport at Le Mans, and contributing writer for magazines such as Magneto, Motorsport, and Octane. And Sam is a full member of the British Racing Drivers Club. Now, for years, Harry Metcalfe was best known in the automotive world for co-founding Evo magazine in 1998. He left Evo in 2013 and became an outside advisor to Jaguar Land Rover, setting up the JLR special operations. But he also started to dabble in YouTube videos, which morphed into Harry's Garage, documenting his collection of cars and motorcycles. Now he has 350,000 subscribers. Many of his videos have been watched over 1 million times, and he's just been named Influencer of the Year in the UK News Press Awards. All hail Harry.
Yeah, not quite.
And going international as head of design at Touring Superleggera, Louis de Fabribeckers has overseen the famous coach builders projects from the 2008 Bellagio Fastback and the A8 GTX Berlinetta to the 2018 Touring Shah de Persia. Perfect examples of the haute couture philosophy that has made touring a respected player in the luxury car world. Other projects have included the 2010 Bentley Continental Flying Star, the 2012 Disco Volante, the 2016 Disco Volante Spider, and the 2014 Mini Superleggera Vision. With his rigorous approach, Louis perpetuates the essential values of Touring Superleggera's design: elegance through simplicity, balance, and lightness. And you're all very welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Yeah, well, good to see you here. Now, we're talking about poster cars. And as I said in my slightly irreverent introduction, this should mean supercars that you have pinned on your wall. If I look at the description on the class, description of the class on the website of the virtual concourse, it says supercars you dreamt of and stuck to your wall. Any true supercar from Miura-onwards is eligible up to an original model launch date of 1989 latest. Entrants will be judged on rarity, performance, and condition. This class will see the cream of the world's supercars. And I think you'll all agree we have got an astonishing lineup of cars, 20 odd cars. The earliest being a 1963 Shelby Cobra Mark 1 right up to an 1989 Aston Martin V8 Vantage Volante Zagato 6.3 litre, and lots of stunning cars in between. But Harry, starting with you if I may, looking at the entry list, they're all great cars, but do you think they all meet the description of the class? Are they all supercars?
Well, they're all very desirable cars, but whether they're actually poster cars, I suppose, is that what we're going to decide here. And I think there's a key difference between the two. The poster car, to me, is highly driven by the design of it and the potential and what you're going to do with it. And it's not all about performance. It's just that lust, isn't it? That thing where you want to you put it on the wall because you want to keep looking at it. So that's what my criteria is.
And I think a lot of cars fit that criteria. Others are still fantastic cars, but maybe not supercars. But all of these cars have been on somebody's wall. But Sam, there's some real standout cars there for sure. Particularly from a driver's perspective, is there one that catches your eye, or a few that catch your eye from a design point of view, as well as something you'd like to drive?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is a big difference between that poster car. I spent a fortune in Athena, I think the name of the shop was, where we got these massive bedroom posters back in the day. And the cars that I tended to have on my wall actually turned out, when I was later able to drive some of them, not to be such great cars after all. So I think we all define supercar a little bit differently. It's a subjective term. And for me, it is probably more about looks and outrageous design, and I can forgive a few kind of character failures, shall we say. But now I'm older and immersed in the world of racing, I do tend to favour cars that drive well, that have more substance and style. So I've shifted in that way. And I'd say that that has changed the cars that I would pick from this list versus the sort of 15-year-old me that had this bedroom wall full of posters all back to back.
Well, I take your point. Marek, if I could come to it from a design point of view, they're all great cars. Each has its own qualities, and there are reasons why these would appeal to those who stuck on their wall. And some of them are undoubtedly design icons, in my humble opinion. So therefore, they're worthy poster cars. But as a designer, is there two or three that stand out to you as being iconic designs that will always stand the test of time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there are some of the cars that you described. I'm not going to pick them now, but as Harry mentioned, they have to create this desire, the want, a need. I want to put it on my wall and stare at it every single day. And having such amazing proportion through the design language of something is how you'll get that. And the drama that Sam just talked about in terms of outrage, when you think of something like a GT40, simple in its name, dramatic in what it was trying to do, it shifted. And we've seen the recent 66, the movie about the 66 battle with Ferrari. It's just a car that changed the perception of racing as well. It did something very, very different. And I think anything that is a true design icon has actually challenged in other aspects as well. It's challenged the layout of the car, it's challenged the performance criteria of the car. And obviously, because of all of those things, because it does challenge, it looks different and it makes you want to look at it. Miura is another one. I mean, look at, and again, I'm still amazed that the same designer could create Miura and Countach. Completely different form languages for one brand. Both are poster cars, and Harry's showing that because he's got one behind him. But the same designer created them. One incredibly emotional, one incredibly exotic in its language, and almost feline in character, and the other one so dramatic in its hard-edged language. Such a change, but both beautiful Lamborghinis. Icons of design for sure.
Well, they are. Yeah, quite. I mean, look at that poster behind Harry. It's almost brutal, isn't it? That thing. It's just a go faster machine. But Louis, coming to you, it could be said, and we've picked up some of the comments so far, that in some cases these are poster cars because the style has surpassed their substance. So they were built to look fantastic, and they may not have driven or performed particularly well. But do you think some of those cars are those that as Sam said earlier, there are some that you love the shape, but when you come to drive it, it actually doesn't deliver, but it still looks good?
Yes, indeed. Well, by definition, these poster cars are static beauty. I check in the list, and there is like one or two cars which respond to this definition. The first one is the DeLorean. I never drove it, but it seems that this Renault French engine wasn't at the level of the design. You look at the car, it's just amazing. Obviously, due to this stainless steel brushed body, which is quite like coming from the space, and then this amazing kinematic system for the doors, which are very show off. You expect something like a V8 or a V12, and not this small little engine.
Well, it's a good example, Lou, because there you go. That's something that it looks astonishing, whether you like the design or not. It looks astonishing, but you know, it probably was.
There is one DeLorean which is extremely fast and quite well known.
It goes back
one
in
from
time.
The movie.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's the only one. All the other ones are quite slow, I believe.
Yes.
But never had the chance to drive it.
Well,
but,
if we have time at the end of this, whether it's after I've stopped recording or not, I'll tell you a good DeLorean story when I was present at the launch of the car.
Okay.
Back in the day, which is quite amusing. I'll tell you that. But Harry, coming back to you. I mean, we're just touching on this with Louis there, but you know, to me, a poster car is an icon that transcends just being a car. It's more than that. And for instance, the Lotus Turbo Esprit is a poster car because it was a Bond car, like the DeLorean was Back to the Future car. So it's recognisable to film buffs who might not be car people.
Yeah, I would say the Lotus Esprit actually is to the car buff as well, because it introduced a new Lotus, that wedge design from Giugiaro. So it actually set a trend alongside with the Countach, the new design language for mid-engine cars. So the Bond is the glitter on top, I would suggest.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, we've got on this class, we've got to think poster, and therefore I'm going to put looks ahead of the drive in the car in this instance.
Right, and I think you're right. I think that's the nature of the class that the judges have got to decide upon, and so you know, whilst driving takes second place. But Sam, back to you as a driver. You know, if this class is about appearance over ability, but if you look for ability over appearance, can you see some cars there that you specifically have driven or would like to drive where they happen to look good, but you think they would do well as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking long and hard about this, browsing through the list earlier on, and the way I sort of think about it is a scale with sort of great driving performance on one end of the scale, and you know, beautiful or extraordinary looks at the other. And where is the perfect balance? Which of these cars sits neatly in the middle? And I couldn't find one on the list that is dead center, but the one that comes closest to me is probably the BMW M1, because it's a great looking thing, but I would argue maybe not as spectacular as some of the others. Not as spectacular, for example, as a Testarossa, which was definitely one of my poster cars as a kid. And yet it is quite startling to look at. It has got that wedge-shaped design, which I think is a personal criteria for a supercar for me. But the nice thing about the M1 is it's not so loud. And when you drive the road car, what you find is something that's almost too good, because the chassis is very kart-like in its handling. That mid-engine design gives a really beautiful weight distribution. It's not necessarily the prettiest, but it is attractive, and it's got that subtlety to it that means when you're sort of trundling through a town centre or whatever it is, you're not creating a load of havoc and drawing a load of attention, which for some is the very opposite of what a supercar should do, but for others is bang on. They don't want that attention, but they do want to be able to drive a supercar. I've been very lucky to spend a lot of time at the wheel of both the road-going M1 and the race car. Yeah. The only thing I would say is that, you know, anything that you turn into a race car can go from being absolutely terrible to really quite capable. But the M1 sits very close. The road and race car very, very close in the way they feel and handle the gearbox, the sensation you get from that straight six. It's very linear power. It feels fantastic. As you open the throttle, everything just responds quite immediately, but also in a very progressive way. And it's the same as you feed the steering wheel in toward an apex. Everything that happens is very proportional, I would say. So there's a great balance in every aspect, both in the road and the race car. The only thing I wish from the road car is that it had more power, because the chassis is so capable that it could easily cope. I think it's got about 280 horsepower, the road car, and it could easily cope with another 100, I'd say.
More, yeah.
It's very, very nice. That's why I love the M1 Pro car so much, because that has got a load of power. It does make the noise. It's got the extra, you know, the wings, the arches, the front splitter, everything that you would kind of want to add to that very pure original Giugiaro shape. It's got, and that for me is sort of the supercar iteration of the M1. And I would say that of all of them on the list, whilst there's some very stiff competition, if I'm looking for that sweet spot between great driving performance and appearance, that probably comes closest. But I don't rate it as the sexiest. I just rate it as a very handsome car.
Well, it's a German car. They don't do sexy, do they? Sorry, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Sorry, they'll edit that out. Marek, just coming back to you, if I may. I mean, you talked earlier about that a single designer could pen the Miura and the Countach. But if you look at the range of cars we're talking about today, you've got a bigger range. So from a design perspective, how can you compare, if you can at all, something like the Countach with a Dodge Charger? That's another of our poster cars.
Yeah, it is. I've just flicked actually on my other screen the Cobra, the 63 Cobra, and I was going to use that as the example.
Well, do.
Yeah, just in terms of its language and how it's clearly, when Sam was just talking about the car's drivability, and we were talking about perfection in balance through mid-engine, if you look at the period that we're looking at here, mid to late 60s and the early 60s, as cars were transitioning from these front mid-engine, very mid-engine oriented in the latter half, and later 59 cars into early 60s were very much the front engine era. And you're starting to see the change as we go through. So we were seeing these incredible spaceships.
Yeah.
You know, imagine seeing a Miura for the first time, a P4 for the first time, the GT40 for the first time, and then later on, obviously, Countach, when you'd been used to seeing things like the Shelby Cobra from '63, which were these incredibly emotional surfaces. But I tell you, if you're at one of the classic racing events, you hear and see a Cobra coming round sideways, and the hairs on the back of your neck are stood up for a week, because the sound of these cars moving and shifting around the circuit, absolutely incredible. So for me, yes, it's hard to compare Countach with a Cobra from '63. However, if we talk about poster again, what is the poster? What's it doing to you? What's the desire? And if I had heard in the day a Cobra, I would always be in love with the Cobra, because the sound of those machines as they're moving, as they're drifting around the circuit, the geniuses that can drive them in the way that they need to be driven, they are exceptional machines. I have a great story. I did one of the Goodwood races, and I was in a DB4 GT, and Darren Turner came past me in the Cobra sideways, but with his thumb up at me. So I've always thought, this is, what an amazing car. And I think as a poster car, still an amazing product. It's the form language is just exquisite, the way the light falls across it. And this was a car which was not really designed in the way that the great Italian cars or the Italian design houses were designed. This was more about the engineer creating the form and the shape to meet the requirements of fitting around a given engineering package. But it's just someone who understood how do you bash and treat aluminium to create this wonderful body, this wonderful form.
Yeah.
So it's hard to compare, but I know where my heart lies.
Louis, can I just talked about the Ferraris in there. There's several Ferraris in the list. If I haven't counted them up, but there's probably more Ferraris than anything else in that list. You know, is there sort of a design language that travels through these cars, or as you know, as Marek was saying earlier, with the Lamborghinis, are they, even though it's the same designer, are they completely different products of a different era?
Well, I think that through these cars, and especially the Beretta Boxer and the Testarossa, you can really see the DNA, the talent of the Italian carrozzeria Pininfarina. There is a link in terms of style, and you can really see the signature from Pininfarina, which is, first you see the silhouette of the car, which is quite elegant, quite classic, and then through the details, very few details, you can see how modern were that car for that time.
Yeah.
I think maybe the only difference with for example, the Countach, which is a real iconic car and stays as an icon, in regarding the Testarossa or even the Boxer, they nearly created trends. So they were extremely modern for that time, but then different car manufacturers or coach builder follow that kind of line. It's Pininfarina is extremely brave to do a classic timeless design, but at the same time extremely modern for that time.
This is a, just looking at some of the pictures here. This is, you know, Marek was talking about this car earlier, the line of it, but this is just, you know,
they're very sensual. A Cobra design. I think it's yeah, I mean, they always appeal, the Cobra design. I always think it's men like curves, don't they? We're sort of in our DNA, we like curves, so we're going to love a car like a Cobra. I always think that's part of it. It's where we see beauty, in objects. And,
the line, it makes the screen look so tall, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, it does here. Yeah,
but gorgeous shape.
And again, these as poster cars, you know, the drama of something like the Countach behind Harry or a Miura isn't there because this shape and form is more familiar to us. But when you're next to these cars, wanting to run your hands across the surfaces is just something that you can't resist, because it is such a sensual surface, and just understanding the flow of lines by feel for me with a Cobra is just exceptional.
Well, here's that other extreme. Countach. I mean, this is just astonishing, isn't it?
And if you see that, the one thing, I'm very lucky to own one, I can never get over that curve from that rear tail light. You see it rises over the wheel, drops down again to the door, and then rises again over the front wheel. And it's all curves. You think it's straight and it's done with a ruler, but actually when you have it, it's remarkable how curvaceous it is.
Yeah.
Wow. You forget, especially that very early, very pure incarnation of the design, don't you? Just forget how impactful it is. And given that this is a topic about poster cars, given the choice of this on the bedroom wall or the Cobra, for me it would be the Countach all day long. But given the choice of which one to go for a country lane blast, I'd take the Cobra all day long, I think.
Let's just look at the one you were talking about, Sam, earlier, which is the M1. I mean, this is I was very rude about German design, but I mean this is an astonishing car. And I was reading the blurb about it. They were so excited about this. This was such a leap forward, wasn't it, in terms of their specialist car division they had at the time.
But you have to remember, you know, I mean, funny enough, just looking at this makes me think it's one of the very few BMWs that I think looks great in that bright red. It's sort of, it's not a color I'd like to see on many other BMs, but on this, it looks perfect. And you have to remember, this car didn't come straight out of Munich. You know, this thing started with design engineers in Italy, and that's where its form was shaped. And later, the Germans had to take it over because it was supposed to be done by Lamborghini. And there's all sorts of fun stories about Lamborghini going bust in the middle of the project, and some of the designers and engineers having to break into the design office in the middle of the night to rescue some of their drawings, so that the project didn't just evaporate as everything sort of went into administration. And then, of course, having done that, they were able to carry on and subcontract the various elements of the build to various specialists, both in Modena and back in Germany. So you've got this wonderful sort of German-Italian collaboration, but it's no surprise really that it has that wedge shape, because it did start, of course, with the Italians.
Well, I moved on to the one that Louis was talking about. Louis, here you go. Here's this astonishing looking car with the less than impressive engine, but what an amazing looking car.
Indeed, quite exceptional, especially when you see it like this. And yeah, when you can see the body and touch it, very, very impressive. Again, it's a true poster car as soon as the engine is not at the level of the design.
Well, as a taxpayer in the UK, I'd just like to say it's a pleasure that I was able to fund this for everybody. This was, as you may remember, guys, this was built in Northern Ireland. Dunmurry was where this was built.
Yeah.
At some considerable cost to the British taxpayer. But let's look at something which again came up in our conversation earlier, which has got to be one of the most
yeah, love it.
It's not a red one for a change either. So here you go. This is an astonishing looking car.
Perfect as well.
Yeah, I like these earlier ones. One, you've got the very simple wheel, the knock-on wheel rather than a bolt wheel. Around the back, they're much smoother around the back because they haven't got catalysts. They're just a better design. And then the single mirror, which is just bizarre when you do it. It's very odd. Why that ever came about, I have no idea. It's quickly changed. They were the same on the Pagani Zonda, and it's just the worst place to have a mirror because you don't realise how wide your car is because your mirror is inside. So it's not a good idea, especially when there's only one.
Astonishing looking thing.
Yeah, but I think it's aging really well now because it doesn't look as, I don't know. This is one of its best shots, I think. The way they used those louvers and went round the rear tail lights and just have this clean look of design is a very distinctive look.
Marek, you got a view on that?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think, you know, this is where you start to see, if you look at all the language in the particular view that's on screen now, you start to see how this car really relies on the modern form of graphics. So it's one of the first cars that really applied a graphic language to the car as well. If you look at one of the prior cars, the green Lamborghini, where one of the most amazing things is the side glass angles that are so flat through the door and actually become the top of the car. Whereas here you've got a very typical side glass and then shoulders outboard, but using a graphic language to define its width. As you say, the veins or the vents that you see on the side of the car appear to come around the back and follow around. So you're starting to hide the functionality behind what has become a graphic language on the car. So I think that's where it's quite unbelievable and therefore very recognizable, because the last thing you always remember in your head, side view of a Testarossa, are the louvers on the side of it. And in this view, the louvers that run the full width of the car at the back.
The other bit I always love of it, just which we had on that other photograph, was actually the rear screen being like a 246 Dino. It's sort of very curvaceous rear screen, which you don't know is a very Ferrari signature. But yeah, obviously the side slats very, very obvious.
Yeah, stunning looking thing. Well, let's look at something slightly different. This came up in our conversation earlier as well, which was the Lancia Stratos. Marek, you were saying that some of your designers, younger guys in particular, would start to hold this up as being.
Yeah, absolutely, because it challenges the norm. It challenges proportion. It challenges the expectation of what you would imagine. This kind of visor windscreen as well is incredibly cool way to look at the car, which is giving you it's a cockpit effectively. If you imagine the cockpit of a jet fighter sitting on top of this kind of wedge form. So you've got two different languages kind of interplaying together as well. This very strong wedge, but this very, very curvaceous screen which sits on the top. And it's just unusual. Cars simply don't do that and haven't done that. And Stratos has done it incredibly well. And I can't think of many cars that have the A-pillar position where it is and that full wraparound screen, unless you get into the race cars that you might still see today racing around in endurance races at the LMP level.
Sam, have you driven one of these?
I have, and I was just going to pick up on that point about the A-pillar. We made a film for one of these for Petrolicious, and I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but in the research, we read that the A-pillars are positioned where they are because first and foremost, this was designed purely as a competition car. And they had the drivers inputting various desires, various bits, sort of observations from previous cars that they wanted addressed into this. And one of the things is they need great apex vision and uninterrupted vision. So they kick back these A-pillars, and then that helped to form this shape, which is now obviously so iconic and happens to look great. But it was actually apparently very much with sort of drivers' performance in mind and getting their field of vision to be pretty much uninterrupted. And having driven it myself, I can tell you it is. You feel, obviously, because that wedge shape slopes down so aggressively in front of the windscreen, you've got no real sense of where the front of the car is. Luckily, it's quite short, but you really feel like you're sat forward over the front axle. And it's such a short wheelbase. And if you just look at that photo, you can see that the wheelbase itself isn't that much longer than the width of the car, the track width itself. So you've got a very, very nimble car, which makes it incredibly responsive to direction changes, very kart-like handling. But again, it's one of these chassis that could easily cope with a ton more horsepower. And I found that it really rewarded momentum driving, trying not to kill the speed too much on the brakes, try to carry revs in particular through the corners so that the thing is alert and alive when you want to get on the throttle on the way out. But I just love that it's sort of, okay, well, what do we need to do to design a great handling car? Let's put the engine there, let's put the A-pillars there, let's have this wheelbase, that track width, and then let's just sort of drive a wedge through it with the bodywork, and paint it a bright color, and it'll look how it looks. And that to me is a wonderful example of form following function and not the other way around. And I really think that we could learn a lot from that today. I feel like as much as I think we're living this great era for sort of hypercar design, a lot of it is sort of form first, function second. But cars like this are proof that it needn't be that way to end up with a really stunning shape.
Well, thanks. I just thought we'd probably finish on this one. I mean, this, Marek, you talked about this. This is about form and function meeting. But this is such an iconic car because, as you said, this did what it said on the tin, didn't it? This is
I mean, it's a game changer. And again, I love the fact 40 inches. I mean, when you're next to one of these, they're so low to the ground. I'm 6'4", so the same height as Dan Gurney. So I have to have the Gurney bubble on it to get in it. But wonderful cars, incredible proportions. And again, this just simple desire to make the car perform and create an object through its proportion through mechanical layout to get the performance. I mean, look how long the front overhang is versus the rear overhang. It's from a designer's perspective, it's just not where you'd want to be, but it does it so wonderfully well. And that's all there to create and generate the downforce at the front and use that inner section as the wing at the front. So it's a car which it was a game changer in its day. It was done to challenge and it was done to win. And in the end it did, so, brilliant car. Brilliant.
Well, as you say, it was brought to everybody's attention by the film chronicling the competitive the competitive race between Ford and Ferrari, which has become legend. But yeah, I mean, the car still. And I think, Louis, some of the modern iterations of that, of course, we've seen the modern GT40, the sort of celebration of that. Have they managed to maintain the spirit of that design up to today, do you think?
Well, I would say that I quite like the version from 2001, which was quite of a copy-paste, but with very sinuous proportion and very extremely sexy. The one which was presented last year or 2 years ago, it's quite different. It's extremely different, and I think that it's more the the general character, like an extremely modern shape for this time, as it was at that time for the the original GT40. So you have these channels, these huge channels on the right and on the left through the body, between the body and between the engine bay and the rear wings, which are quite impressive.
Well, gentlemen, I think that's our time. So I wanted to just say thank you very much on behalf of the Concours for coming to join us on this chat. Glad to see you didn't have to travel too far, most of you. At least this is the advantage of Zoom. But no, thanks a lot. Enjoyed the chat.